that announced what the theme for the Unity's World Day of Prayer is going to be this year. I know we got one at the office, I got one at home, but it's even in the midst of this, I can be at peace. And I thought, what a great theme for right now in this time. As we sure see a lot of whirling, much to do about nothing stuff. It's a great line, because you know that we are constantly wanting to make dramatic things that don't have to be. When Greg and I were having breakfast yesterday morning before he left, he told me that one of the times that he had the most laughs at his gig, his stick that he does, was when he was asked to speak and sing at a church in Colorado, I think it was, and it was just 5 days after 9/11. And he thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be so hard, because we've all faced this frightening experience and tragedy, and I don't know if people will think it's okay to laugh, you know? I mean, it's kind of weird to go up and do comedy. And so he said, well, I decided I needed to do a theme and fit it all into a theme. And the theme he chose was to know what you can control and what you can't. And that's kind of matches the theme for World Day of Prayer. You know, even in the midst of what looks like a whole big mess in Washington and a lot of running around and much to do about nothing kind of things that they're doing, you know, we can be at peace in the midst of it. We can be at peace in the midst of anything. And when he started talking about what we can control and what we can't control, and it started to get into some of his, you know, like he's got, if you were there, you heard his thing about enough of whiny love songs, you know, and he is on a crusade to end whiny love songs. Yeah, it was pretty good. And he said to me that this crowd, and it was a good-sized crowd that came out, was like they were holding their breath. And when he moved into some comedy, it was like they had to release all this emotion, and it came bursting out of them in laughter. And he said it was the audience of all my years of entertaining that laughed the most. And I realized when he was saying that I know that's true, because there's so many times I'll get worked up over something, and when I look, you know, kind of stand outside myself and watch myself going around in circles about something because I'm not really, you know, it's not my picture of how it was supposed to be or whatever it is. And when I watch myself, I just crack up. You know, it's like I have no control over so many things. In fact, I realized that I have very little control of anything. The only thing I really have control of is my own thoughts, my own feelings, my own belief systems, my own opinions, my own point of view, my own perceptions. That's it. Everything you're doing out there, I have no control over. You know, some of you may be reading a book, you know, under the, you know, table or whatever. I have no control over it. And it's so freeing to get that. How many people think that they are just neurotic enough to want to fix everything on the planet? You know, every time I look out there, I see all these problems. I see all the problems. You know, they're just, you know, not sharing, and they're not playing nice. You know, and I want to fix it, but I have no control over it. And here's the real kicker. Thank God I don't. Because, if I know one thing that I can count on, it's that there is a divine order in the universe. And I am just a little, speck in the universe here. And it's all going to unfold as it should. There isn't any mistakes with God. There's no, oops, that neck shouldn't have been quite that long on the giraffe. There's no second guessing. If the giraffe didn't have a neck as long as he couldn't get those nice tender leaves on the top of the trees. There's no mistakes in this. It's all happening perfectly. And one thing I know is that when you do get churned up about something, that if you can get to laughter, you will see the problem shrink to a minuscule size. Because what you have done when you start to laugh at something is you have stepped away far enough to see how silly it is to worry about something you can't control. And we as humans are addicted to control. Have you noticed? Ken Keyes wrote about that when he wrote the 100 Monkey Theory. And he said that everyone on the planet has an addiction, and the addiction is to control. To trying to control other people, other places, the world, the politics, the this, the that. Trying to control that is, insane. It really is insane. I don't know about you, all you that have been moms out there, but I always kind of had my kids, and I was thinking, I wonder what it would be like to take my kids somewhere out in public and their clothes actually fit them and they weren't dirty and they were, they looked presentable. I mean, it was just impossible with my kids. They played in the mud. They loved, and and they grew so fast, it seemed like 2 weeks later, the pants were up to their shins, and it's really hard to control that. I finally just figured out, if people are going to make judgments about my kids and how they look and how they behave and all that, I just go, wow, I don't want to come to that party. I'm not coming to that party because I'm not coming to the party that things are wrong. Things shouldn't be this way. There is a connection to what we're talking about with relationships. You probably already got there, but what I want to really talk about today is about relationships and how we learn and grow from them. And one of the things that is the thing that makes relationships hard is we think the person we're in relationship with should be making us happy, or at least not making us sad, or at least not, cutting us down, or, ridiculing, or whatever. It doesn't matter whether it's your spouse, your parents, your brothers, your sisters, your children, your grandchildren, your whatever, your coworkers, whatever it is. Nobody has a job to make you happy. I mean, it never got, on the job websites. There just isn't a job like that. And so how do we do relationships and make them in such a way that we are really growing and learning from them? I believe that we have to give our relationships over to Spirit. I believe if you're going to ever have a relationship that works, you have to give it over to Spirit. Because what is true is that if you really surrender it, then the Holy Spirit will give you a new perception. It may not be a perfect perception. It may be a process of perceptions that you get over time. But it is something we all need to do, because in relationships, we think that they have to be work, they have to be hard, and we have to fix them. And if we get angry at each other about something, or we don't agree about something, then we make it into this huge drama. I think that for me, one of the hardest things I had to learn was other people's opinions. It's okay to let them exist. I don't have to convince them of something else. I don't know if you guys have the Jehovah's Witnesses that come to your doors sometimes, but I remember when I was younger, and I just would want to convince them that their mythology did not make any sense. And you know what? It didn't win me any friends. It didn't do me any good at all. It didn't change anything in my world. And, they had all these Bible verses memorized, and they were quoting them, and, and I kept going, well, that's if you do, if you think the Bible is, all anything more than human consciousness being written down. It might be enlightened consciousness. It might be consciousness that's really connected to the Christ of its own being coming through. But the people that wrote the Bible, they wrote it from human consciousness. And everything is filtered through human consciousness. And human consciousness is not developed yet. To the point where we are enlightened enough to know that all these states and stages of consciousness are okay. As a mom, it's really hard when your child is hurt or brokenhearted or upset about something, or angry at you, or angry about something. It's really, really hard sometimes to let them be how they are. Let them be how they are. Has anybody else found that hard to, I wanted to fix them. You want to fix them. You want them to go, hey, here's the happy way to live. Here's a new way of looking at it, And when they're in it, they're in it. Especially when they're teenagers. Man, they just feel everything. So it's almost like all the protection, emotional protection is down, and they're just totally emotional all the time. My son walked in when my daughter and I were having a conversation, and it was a really wonderful conversation. But it was about her wanting to go to college early, and she had enough credits to graduate from high school mid-year, and so she wanted to start college in January, and she wanted to go back to Washington, and I was living in Missouri at the time, going to ministerial school. So I started to cry thinking about her leaving, and she started to cry thinking about her leaving, but knowing she really wanted to do that, and I knew in my heart it was really going to be the best thing for her, and on and on. And my son walks in, and we're both in tears, and he goes, "Why do you women have to be so emotional all the time?" And I'm sure it still bugs him. But, the truth is that tears or laughter are not good or bad. They just are. They're a beautiful mechanism that God has given us to express out feelings so that we can move on. There are some very simple keys to a happy relationship. And it's simple but not easy. You know the difference between simple and not easy. We say that about unity principles. They're very simple, but not easy to live them. And what I'm saying is the basic keys to being in a happy relationship is to love, forgive, and to see the good in whoever you're in relationship with. To constantly be looking for the good. Not looking for what somebody did wrong, not looking for anything that, that you could fix, not trying to fix them, not trying to change them, not trying to do anything to them, just loving, forgiving, and seeing the good. Whenever people have come to me that were having marriage problems or relationship problems, and they would come and they would, one of them would definitely want to be breaking up, and the other one dragged them to counseling so that maybe they could not break up. So there was always that tension going on. And I learned this one thing from my minister that was my minister as I was growing up. And she used to say, I remember when I was a teenager, she said to me, you can have boyfriends, they can break up with you can break up with them, people come and go in your life. But the way to make that so that it is a wonderful experience is you never release anyone until you can stand in front of them and look at them and love them completely, freely, without reservation. That doesn't mean that you cannot set boundaries with them, or you can not invite them to have a relationship with you in a different form. You have the opportunity to create it with wisdom, but the foundation of love is wisdom. So when people want to break up and people want to leave, sometimes it's you who has to stand in loving that person and say, don't call me again. Give me the key to the house. Sometimes it's, I'm going to call the lawyer. And that is wisdom at times, because that's how things flow. I think if we had a high enough picture, we would see that even in the breakups of relationships, it's an opportunity to grow and to mend them, to bring them back to, yes, we have this disagreement, you see it this way, I see it that way, but we can still love each other as human beings, and we can go our separate ways and do our separate lives and only think good thoughts about each other. When we live from that and from total forgiveness, we have the key to keeping a relationship alive. No matter what happens, no matter what you like or you don't like, if you could first say, well, this is how they are, and I have space for people to be how they are. I'm going to choose to have space to let people show up just the way they are. And then there's the harder part. I'm going to forgive anything I take offense at. Because what I understand myself is that when I take offense at something somebody says to me, I am making a judgment just as much as if I was saying it to someone else. You see what I mean? It's like you cannot give out a judgment against anything or anyone without holding the blueprint. You make the same judgment about yourself. You're making the same judgment about yourself. It's an absolute mirror. So if you have someone in your life, and I'm sure a lot of you could think of one person that they would just like to go and say that one thing to, I should have said, one of those I should have said to them when they said that to me. If you have one of those, forgive them right now. Just forgive them. Let it go. It's idle words. It doesn't mean anything about you, and it really doesn't mean anything about them except maybe what they're in a bad mood or what they're thinking at the time. The idea of forgiveness aligns us back with the power of love. Forgiveness opens our hearts to allowing love to guide us again. And it's oftentimes love is the thing that tells you how to say a healthy no. you know. When you live in families, you know, it's tough. There's relationships going on all the time. And when you live in families, it is okay to say, no, I'm not going to be involved in this kind of attitude or behavior, but if you want to be there, be my guest. It's a place where you allow people to think and feel the way they do, and so you can think and feel the way you do. What really truly serves the good for one person serves the good for all. And when you hold on to unforgiveness and resentments and those kinds of things, you are also taking away the good from all. We're all connected. We're all one. We're all unity. And when you get that, when you get to move into that place of a higher love, you understand it. Nobody in the whole universe is wrong or right. They are. They just are. And when we learn to live with whatever that is, then we can see past it to the good. Now, I'm preaching to myself today because there's a big part of me that wants to make judgments about politics, about what should be on TV, about what shouldn't be on TV. I have a whole list of things. You know, they're like my things that, you know, why can't you just remove the shopping channels from my whole TV? Because I don't like to try and find my channels in the midst of all of them. But, you know, that's the way it is. And for me to be frustrated about it does what? Nothing. Just you know, gives me more stress hormones and a bigger tummy. That's what I think. So I guess the point of all of this today is to say, what would it be like if we created a world where we truly let people be? You know, one of the songs Greg sang at the concert on Friday night was one about Jesus. And it started out, Jesus was a bachelor, you know, and all holy people are bachelors because they really can't, you know, deal with a wife and save the world. You know, it's like too much, right? And so he did this whole verse about that. And then he thought, well, you know, so maybe he was a bachelor, but he had these 12 disciple guys, right? So maybe he was gay, right? And before he did that song, he asked me if I thought the congregation could handle that, him saying maybe Jesus was gay, you know. And I said, you know, we're pretty much really working on, you know, making everybody a child of God, no matter what their, you know, attitudes are about anything else. And he said, okay. So he sang this song, and the end of it was maybe, you know, it was a little bit about Jesus was gay. But then he has this just wonderful last verse. Do you remember the wonderful last verse, which talks a little bit about how some Christians believe that's wrong, and that, you know, it's blasphemous to say that about Jesus. But he said, Jesus was the one who said to not judge and to love. And, you know, so I think about that so often when I've talked to people that were of a more fundamentalist or a more traditional kind of evangelical Christian, and there's a part in me that just says, how can I find my point of agreement? Because when you know they're judging you, when you know, I remember having this person I met say to me, oh, you're Unity. Well, I've heard of that. I think that's a cult. But I said, yeah, well, some people think that. And they said, I think Unity, that's that do your own thing church, isn't it? You can believe anything you want. You can do anything you want in Unity. It's a do your own thing church. And I said, wow, that's very insightful. That's what I love about it. It's a do your own thing church. So we have to start by allowing everybody in our world, in our orbit, to do their own thing. Not just here, but in the world. And as we move onward and upward, I'm sure there'll be more perceptions and insights that will help us along the way. God bless.